and welcome to this video. So this video is kind of explaining why I will never read a anything that does not have a fantastical element to it. So anything that doesn't fit sci-fi, dystopia, or fantasy. Uh, because I feel like I don't know if I've explained this properly on my channel, so I'm gonna do it here because just in case people feel like recommending me books that are outside of the genres, there's a reason why I don't read other genres. And frankly, the biggest reason is actually because of trauma. Childhood trauma. So good. Always keeps giving all those lovely things. So for those who don't know, I was abused, physically, mentally, and emotionally, by several different members of my family. There was only one member that actually did physical, abuse to me. Also, excuse any beeping you may hear. There's construction going on outside. These walls are thin. But so I was only physically abused by one member, but mental and emotional abuse happened by several different members of my family. There's a reason I cut them off. I changed my name. I moved stores that I work at. I moved places where I live. They don't know where I am, and there's a good reason for it. So, that's the first and main reason why I don't read anything outside of a fantastical element, just because sometimes there can be a lot of like abuse in like several different types of abuse in books that don't have fantasy or sci-fi or dystopian, and it kind of hits a bit more home to me. Like, I can read all of those elements in a fantasy book, a sci-fi book, and a dystopian book, and it won't like trigger me. But the moment it takes place in the real world, that's when we get a little too close to home. So I prefer not to read those, and it's really hard to tell if that's going to be a theme. A lot of authors are now putting in trigger warnings, which is really nice, but it still doesn't change the fact that some things, like even as simple as gaslighting, because I was gaslit a lot as a kid, can be triggering. So that's one of the reasons why I stay away from anything that takes place in the real world. But that that being said, historical fiction books do exist, and like that's that's not very triggering. No, what I find with those books is most of them I tend to find slow. I don't know what it is, and if I'm not fascinated with the time period, I'm not really gonna enjoy it because I need to be like fascinated and want to learn about the time period. Um, but you know what? So that's not always going to be the case, which is why I stay straight away from historical fiction. The next thing is for specifically romance books. A lot of romance books are very spicy. Uh, However, here's a little fun fact about me. I'm ace. I'm asexual. That's just a thing about me. And one of the reasons why I don't like my books to center around romance is because you get too much into that spice, and I can be fairly sex repulsed. And even just like the said like the fade to black versions, like that's in a lot of YA, sometimes triggers that sex repulsion for me. But you know what, It's fine if it's not in there that often, but I think that's actually one of the reasons why I could not finish Sarah J. Maas's books. It got too spicy. Um, like I'm all good with romance. In fact, I'm helpless. No, I'm a hopeless romantic. However, a lot of books will be like, "Oh, you can't have romance without spicy, sexy time." So, I I try to steer clear of it for that reason. So that's why I'll never read a romance book. Even fantasy romance books, I tend to stray clear of just because if they're focusing solely on like romance, I'm not inclined to really want to read it. Um, like I have a few in my shelves, but I'm only gonna read those when I feel like I can actually handle that. Right now, I can't. In fact, right now, I'm doing rereads because I can't get into a single book right now that I haven't read yet. Uh, but I'm doing rereads on books I've not covered on my channel yet, and for some reason, I have the capability of rereading books that don't, and it almost being like the first time. Like, I don't remember shit. So look forward to, I'm hoping next week when I finish the current book that I'm rereading, and I'm going to finish out that series, rereading it and covering those books, and then we'll get into hopefully something else. Hopefully, I can find myself wanting to read something else, but we'll see. Now, my next reason is don't I don't know what it is, but anything in the real world kind of seems boring to me. Um, I don't know what makes it boring. Maybe because like I have this innate fascination. There's a reason I read more fantasy books than like sci-fi and dystopian. In fact, dystopian's my least read. Uh, but sci-fi is second to fantasy because fantasy has all of that world building, all of that juicy, juicy lore. I love learning everything I can about a new world. I'm fascinated by new worlds and being able to learn about them and just in like not really envision because I have aphantasia, but being able to learn and if I choose to draw it, see the world, this new world for myself and like memorize the rules, magic systems, all of that. There's a reason I reread like Cassandra Clare's Mortal Instruments books a lot as a kid, well as a teenager. It was because I was fascinated by the world that Cassie had created. Because even though it is an urban fantasy, so it's like a hidden world inside of our real world, uh, it allowed me to like see these tiny little tidbits of extra bit of lore every time I reread the books, and it allowed me to memorize a lot of the laws, a lot of the just like all of the lore based stuff is really what I was looking for memorizing. I I've always been huge into lore based books. So the fact that my own books have so much lore that I'm still adding things in the third book tells you that I like lore heavy books. So now I almost never read urban fantasy because most of them don't have enough lore for me to discover. I read like full on fantasy and it allows me to figure out what this world is, figure out how it works. And I love that. That's why a lot of fantasy is so rereadable for me, because I can actually dive into the world. First read is about story, reread is about figuring out the world and how it works. So I'm also doing that on the first read. Are there any other reasons why I would never venture out of these genres? I don't think so. Um, yeah, there's not really much. I'm just, I just can't handle real world stuff. Too, it's too likely to either be boring, triggering in many different ways, or just it's just not my cup of tea. Doesn't have the things that I can learn, because I like to learn about new worlds. I'm just like that. I don't honestly. That's probably why a lot of people read fantasies, because they like the worlds. They like the world building. That's one of the fascinating things about fantasy that people will just eat up. It is that world building. Now, if you suck at world building, don't write fantasy. Trust me. Um, I'm gonna state this from my books. I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. The world I built in the first book is not as complex as it actually is, and you kind of get more into the sense of complexity in the second book, and then you get even more into it in the third book, as a lot of things are just crafted and built, because that's just how I ended up doing this series. My next series will be a lot better, but I'm not getting to that next series for a bit yet. I have been writing the fourth book. I am in chapter 5 now, and oh boy, it's going to be an intense one. It's also going to be a long one. My books have progressively gotten longer as I've gone on, and this fourth one is going to be the end, so it's going to be long. Those are the reasons why I only read sci-fi, dystopian, and fantasy, mostly fantasy, and why I will probably never venture out of these genres, just because of a lot of factors that come from my past, and I'd rather not be reminded of what I went through. I'd rather stick to my avoidant habits. Anyways, that's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a like. If you want to see more content from me, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you get notified when I post a new video. And if you want to support me, go buy my books. Links are in the description. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye!